Hello, today we will be continuing to read Out of the Shadows, Reimagining Gay Men's Lives by Walt Odets. This is going to be part 3 of the first chapter, Are Gay Men Homosexuals? Even as homosexuality is not the whole story of who gay men are, sex in gay lives, as in all human lives, is usually an important experience. In addition to providing a sometimes intimate connection to others, sex can be a means of self-discovery. The altered, disinhibited consciousness of sexual arousal often allows us to experience normally unconscious feelings that are self-revealing. For most gay boys, adolescence is turmoil, but sexual experiences and a developing internal sensibility mutually influence each other, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. As adults, that early formed association often continues to inform the nature of our sexual lives. If a self-accepted early feminine sensibility and supportive sexual experiences incline us to adult sex as a tender and affectionate emotional conversation, an exaggeratedly masculine early sensibility encourages Erik Erikson's idea of genital combat. Genital combat is a sparring exchange that prohibits any vulnerable emotion, and if not full combat, it is very male sport sex focused on the physical act. Almost inevitably, finding our sexual lives is distorted in one way or another by the destructive social idiocy that attempts to prohibit the natural adolescent exploration of feelings, relationships, and sex, particularly for gay people. The prohibition almost never works, but the humanly limiting consequences of the effort are all around us. Most adult sexual lives would find value in both making love and engaging in sport, and the complete absence of either is likely a loss. While the loss of emotionally focused sex sometimes expresses simple inexperience, it can also suggest discomfort with one's internal sensibility, and expression of that sensibility to oneself or others in the revealing act of sex. A surprising number of gay men I have known and worked with over the past 3 decades grew up entirely on sports sex, almost certainly reinforced by both the requisite adolescent segregation of sex from relationships and the narrow, coarse model of most pornography. These men have never thought about the possibility of sex as an emotional conversation and often have little sense of what that idea even means. This is notable in a group that stands out among men as introspective and emotionally transparent. What many of these men do sense is that the sex they are having is, by itself, ultimately unsatisfying and inadequate, and even as they continue to seek something better and more sports sex with other men who, themselves, know nothing but sports sex. What these men have in common, the blind leading the blind in sexual matters, is a developmentally truncated past-adolescence teenage experience that is not of their own making. Adult heterosexual men, at least those who are paying attention, do have one advantage over many gay men. They have encountered the emotional and sexual sensibilities of women. In fact, many gay men have had sex with women, and there's often a significant difference between the sexual sensibilities of gay men who have and those who have not. Members of the sports sex club have something to learn from some other gay men, and this need not be only from men who have had sex with women. A gay man who, like Felix, has found his own blending internal sensibility and learned to express it sexually may have much to impart to those who are interested and open. For gay men, one uniquely gay sexual experience can support the exploration of unconscious and conscious feminine sensibilities and allow sharing these sensibilities with others. This is receptive anal sex, which, as Felix put it, is the most wonderful thing in the world. While receptive anal sex can be enacted as sports sex, and often is, it holds much more potential. The physical act can pleasurably express a receptive emotional state of trusting vulnerability and intimacy, feelings more usually understood and valued by women. A man lets another man inside, both physically and emotionally, in a way that straight men rarely do. Felix described the lack of receptive anal sex as a huge loss, a deprivation that would have made me a much shallower person, and he is not alone in such feelings. Even as having sports sex and making love are both ways of connecting to others, they share relatively little emotional territory. Being in love and making love are among our most vulnerable experiences, and there's little doubt about why so many men, gay and straight, find love and tenderness daunting. A constant diet of sports sex that insists on dominance and invulnerability, or sometimes masochistic submission, is often a fallback position for those who are afraid of gentler feelings. All men have at least an unconscious component of feminine sensibility formed in infancy and childhood. Pure sports sex keeps that sensibility unconscious, where it cannot contribute to a sense of wholeness and, for gay men particularly, authenticity. While still in graduate school, Felix once said to me during a therapy session, "I know this is going to set psychoanalysis back 100 years, but until I got fucked, I didn't know what it meant to be a real person. It was the first time I felt I was whole. It was an experience I wouldn't give back for anything." It is not clear whether the physical act of sex instinctually informs the emotion, or the conscious and unconscious emotion interpret the act and give it its meaning. I believe it works both ways, simultaneously. Human sex is magic. Many assume that the readily observable expressed sensibilities of a gay man, physical carriage, speech, dress, or interests, are a reasonably good predictor of his position in sex. Car buffs are assumed tops, interior designers bottoms. In actuality, gay men's sexual lives, which are only one aspect of expressed sensibility, correlate quite variably with other aspects of expressed sensibility because the coherence between our internal and external lives is so variable. Sex is a relatively private event that can allow expression of internally felt emotion that may be little expressed in other aspects of life. The ability to experience and share feelings that we do not normally consciously experience or express is one important reason that sex is so powerful in our peculiarly self-conscious human lives. Males are physically capable of both insertion and receptivity, which in sex between two men offers a rich range of physical possibilities, each of which can express some aspect of the emotional sensibility. The sexual act is often a physical metaphor for a feeling. In a sexually altered state of consciousness, we exist not in our everyday cortical lives, but in our emotional lives, and we are, for the moment, more expressively open and thus more connected both to ourselves and to others. If sex, particularly communicative sex, can open us up and provide a desired connection, why are many so frightened of sex, and why is it so difficult to talk about? One answer is implicit in the question. Many are afraid of fully knowing themselves and of revealing what they do know to others. The sexual expression of unconscious or conscious internal sensibility works against the very effort to keep the sensibility unconscious or private. Even as we are aware that almost everyone engages in sexual acts, emotionally expressive sex can feel as unmentionable as the unconscious, or the conscious but private, sensibility that is expressed in the sex. When we limit or hide our sexual lives, we're concealing not the physical acts, but the feelings we fear or feel shame about. The sexual act that I have cited as most characteristic of the gay sensibility, the anal-receptive or feminine position, remains an often contentious issue, even among gay men. Many are self-professed pure bottoms or exclusive tops, although every gay man has experienced ardent bottoms on the top and self-professed tops on the bottom. Many gay men hold an unspoken, often unconscious contempt for bottoms, just as straight men often hold contempt for women, not to mention womanly men. The feelings are not so much about the behavior itself, but about the feminine sensibility expressed in the bottom position. In both men, the exclusive top sees parts of himself, unfamiliar, alien feeling parts, that he cannot accept or express, an idea that supports the common insight among gay men that the exclusive top is often attempting to prove to himself and others that he is not a bottom. Sometimes those with exclusive bottom or top identities are accurately expressing their entire conscious internal sensibilities, but often they are also containing aspects of their unconscious sensibilities that might, if recognized and allowed expression, nurture a broader, more authentic experience. The complexity of internal sensibility and its sexual expression is seen in another experience that most gay men also know. There are masculine ways to be on the bottom, the assertive bottom, and feminine ways to be on the top, the affectionate top. Such positions, even when they are exclusive, are often expressions of more complex, more integrated sensibilities. With exploration comes discovery. Despite the number of relatively exclusive bottoms and tops in gay communities, roles that, not coincidentally, partly mimic heterosexual life, a third possibility more obviously expresses a blended gay sensibility. In the parlance of gay communities, this is the man who is versatile. As the term suggests, the versatile man is both bottom and top, receptive and insertive, depending on the partner, the dynamic of the relationship, or the sensibility of the moment. Different people, different relationships, and different moods motivate the expression of different aspects of the internal sensibility. Some of this versatility seems instinctual, in which I include unconscious memory of the infantile and childhood experience of growing up with parental giants. Many men are more likely to be on the bottom with partners who are physically stronger, taller, older, or more self-assured and accomplished than they are. With a slighter, shorter, younger, or less accomplished partner, the same man may be on top. Some men are attracted to stronger, taller men precisely because of the more feminine sensibility they engage, while others are avoidant because that feeling is uncomfortable. A young man who described himself as typically a bottom once told me that he was sexually interested in men who are a bit taller than I am, but if they get much taller than that, I get uncomfortable. I'm not into men who are shorter than me. Men about my height are possible, depending on the rest of them. This man was not merely sorting out his physical attractions. He was describing how differences in others engaged his emotional sensibilities. Some engaged the valued part of his feminine sensibility, some intimidated it, and some left him unengaged. Although women as a group tend to be more flexible and eclectic in choosing partners, this young man's feelings mirror those of many heterosexual women. Gay men often describe themselves as having a physical type, which is often asserted as an almost axiomatic, unchangeable fact. But in pursuing a particular type, a man is not merely sorting men for their aesthetic appeal, he is responding to how different physical types engage his internal sensibilities. Those sensibilities, often including unconscious components, are neither axiomatic nor unchangeable. They are dynamic and open to change for the man who is able to explore them. Internal sensibility is far richer and more complex than anything that could be defined by physical types, and being gay is an opportunity to explore the potential. As an older friend once told me, I've always thought that I had a type, but the truth is that if Rumpelstiltskin crawled out from under the carpet, I might well find myself enchanted. That's the way it has always actually worked for me. Another friend, Morris, told me that after dinner, he and his partner Billy sometimes arm wrestled to see which one of us gets to be on the bottom that night. The winner would be on the bottom. I knew both Morris and Billy, and they both expressed the kind of developmental outcome and integrated sensibility that Felix expressed. They feel authentic and comfortable in both their feminine and masculine aspects, and they also manifested both in their non-sexual lives. They were emotionally versatile, and they expressed that sexually and otherwise. Their relationship worked without the polarization of emotional and sexual roles that is common in heterosexual and some gay relationships. If the natural differences in the unconscious and conscious internal sensibilities of women and men were substantial, we would not need to insist on the socially constructed differences in expressed sensibility that we almost universally rely on. Carriage, manner of speech, dress, and ornamentation are all socially dictated trifles that, in themselves, are inconsequential. Apparently, anxiety about gender sensibility, as expressed in trifles, is long-standing. Deuteronomy 22:5 of the Christian Bible states, "A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God." It is no accident that today's more acknowledged gender-integrated sensibilities are coincident with unisex clothing, the rise of the metrosexual, and the genderqueer movement, where women's cloaks are often seen on men. Most of us take the idea of gender and gender identification much too seriously, and in doing so, we impoverish ourselves by splitting off aspects of the natural human experience that are rightly ours. Morris offered me one more piece of information about arm wrestling with Billy. If either lost the wrestling match 3 times in a row, that third time he was on the bottom anyway. The 2-time losers, third-time winner was usually Morris. I'm not as strong as Billy, so this keeps things fair and square, but since it's pretty much a 1-in-3 deal, unless Billy has had too much wine with dinner, I've learned a lot about topping. And I like it. It's also me. When I met Billy, I was more of a bottom, and Billy told me he was pretty much an exclusive top. When he said that, I thought, yeah, right, then what's the point of being gay? It took about a month for us to straighten that out. When I fucked him lovingly, I could see a beautiful, sweet, gentle woman in his face, and I loved him for that side of himself. I fell in love with him partly for that, and he fell in love with me. I had given him something he had never had, and he had given me more than I ever expected. It is not the cow that makes the fry cook. Through the conflation of biological sex and sensibility, a society establishes a template for gender-appropriate internal and external sensibilities that contradicts human nature. In the social plan, vaginas get one internal life and a wardrobe to match, penises something else. As I have described it, and both Felix and Morris have expressed it, the gay sensibility constructs gender more humanly by integrating elements of conventionally feminine and masculine sensibilities into the life of a single person, who is most often of one biological sex. While all people have this integrative potential, and many, gay and straight, exercise it to varying degrees, as a group, gay people most visibly assert it. The gay sensibility blurs the conventional social construction of gender, and I am certain that the stigma surrounding gay people, and any people of apparently ambiguous gender, is much less about sexual behavior than about the threat gay people appear to pose to the conventional constructions of gender identity. Relatively few heterosexuals would be as enchanted as Morris by Billy's emotional transformation during sex into a beautiful, sweet, gentle woman. They would be threatened, just as they are inversely often threatened by assertive, self-sufficient, and competent women. In insisting that biological sex and sensibility be aligned in dictated, unnatural ways, society has emotionally impoverished a great many people, and it has posed a dilemma for LGBTQ people, who accept the authority of the societal construction, an acceptance usually tied tightly to early parental expectations. A majority of gay-identified men are biologically male and have a male self-identity, regardless of the mix of feminine and masculine sensibilities. The mix of feminine sensibilities does not change the biological sex and only rarely changes the internal gender identity. As a child, Felix thought briefly about being a woman and abandoned the idea because he had a penis, and Billy never thought he might be a woman, and Morris never experienced him as one. Morris experienced Billy as a man with an emotional complexity that Morris valued and loved. As young adult men, all three significantly surmounted their restrictive developmental experiences and accepted what they really felt and who they really were. The experience for all three was expansive. The root of the dilemma that social constructions of sex, gender, and sensibility broadly pose for gay people is simple. Gay people are often not like heterosexuals. Unfortunately, the social constructions they face go beyond the simple conflation of biological sex and sensibility. In the societal model, observed biological sex, gender self-identity, internal self-identity, and expressed sensibility must all be aligned. As children and young adults, we easily internalize this model, and any discontinuity between the four components becomes a painful internal struggle that is worsened by societal stigma and rejection. Although society has created a conflict by imposing a simplistic, inhuman model, it is left to LGBTQ people to deal with the problem. It is LGBTQ people who are left feeling deviant and misaligned. We have the choice of either rejecting the social construction in a pursuit of wholeness and authenticity, or bringing ourselves into alignment. Today, the public voice of American gay communities, which is usually the voice of older men who were born in an era of almost universal social intolerance, has largely accepted the conventional social construction of sex and sensibility. This voice is attempting the realignment of negative gay self-experience through the assimilation of gay lives into mainstream society. Some older and many younger men reject this effort, but the public voice insists on one primary tenet. The biological sex of sexual partners aside, the little homosexual piece, gay people are just like everyone else. It is for this reason, not because human diversity must be accepted and respected, that LGBTQ people should be accorded the legal rights, protections, and respect that everyone else presumably receives. While this may be a politically expedient strategy for gay spokespeople, it shifts the burden of self-acceptance and self-realization back onto the LGBTQ individual. The strategy asserts the right of LGBTQ people to have sexual relations with those of the same sex, but not to live with complex internal and express sensibilities that are misaligned with the conventional four-part formula. In gay marriage, both men become husbands, and except for the fact that the other party to the marriage is also a husband, both men, like all married men, become marrieds who presumably embody every social desirable trait that such identities are meant to imply. This community agenda largely abandons the needs of gay people who would insist on their own more complex sensibilities and forms of life, leaving them to face the penalizing sanctions that other non-husbands and non-wives must also unfairly endure. For many gay men, today's community agenda is not support, but abandonment. It appears to offer not a new life out of the closet, but life in a new closet. An emotional closet that is, like the gay closet of lore, a destructive space in which to live. From an early age, Felix largely followed his own construction of gender and sensibility, but Felix's inborn capacities and his favorable family and social support were relatively unusual. For the male-identified gay man who feels that he must accept, or who cannot understand how to accept, the conventional social construction of biological sex, gender identity, and sensibility, there are no easy solutions. Such a man can attempt to bring his sensibilities into conformity with his biological sex and gender identity, at the cost of authenticity and wholeness. He can attempt to bring his gender into conformity with his sensibilities, at the cost of abandoning his male self-identity, or more radically, by also forfeiting his biological sex. As a last resort, the man who accepts the validity of conventional alignment can realign nothing and live with a sense of incoherence, failure, rejection, and too often self-loathing. All of these problematic solutions take conventional ideas about sex, gender, and sensibility too seriously, and all can result in lives that are compromised and incapable of authentic human connection and intimacy. Fortunately, all three solutions and their human consequences are unnecessary if we are able to sidestep the narrow conventional construction of gender and sensibility and live inside and outside more or less as ourselves. A gay friend who had grown up in a gay-adverse family once said to me, "I realized a long time ago that I had only one really important thing to do in life. If I accomplished nothing else, I would figure out how to be myself. Being ourselves is almost always a struggle, sometimes a discouragingly difficult, but never impossible one. In its inevitable mix of happy and unhappy consequences, the struggle offers a real, fully human life. For those who doubt the possibility, allow me to repeat the words of a poet. It is not the cow that makes the fry cook.